Something is happening beneath the quiet surface, and if you have been feeling it lately, it is not your imagination. A final, heavy choice is slowly forming in their heart, and somehow your presence is part of it in a way that cannot be ignored anymore. On the outside, they may still look calm, distant, or even emotionally detached. But inside them, something they once pushed away has grown too strong to stay hidden. A truth they avoided for a long time has become heavier than their ability to ignore it. This is not only about missing you, it is about what your connection awakened inside them and what it forced them to see about themselves. Something inside them has been shifting quietly for a while, even if nothing looked different on the surface. A deeper awareness is now rising, and it is changing the way they understand everything that happened between you. At one point, they believed distance would make the feelings weaker. They filled their time with routines, work, distractions, pride, and emotional silence. They told themselves that if they did not feed the connection, it would slowly fade away. But some connections do not behave that way. Some connections stay alive in the background of the mind, even when ignored. And the more they tried to suppress what they felt, the more it seemed to grow inside them, in a quiet but persistent way. Now they are in a state where looking back feels unavoidable. They are questioning the story they told themselves for so long, and they are starting to wonder if they misunderstood what this connection truly meant. The memories are not fading for them. Instead, they are becoming clearer, more present, and harder to dismiss. There is a deep internal shift happening in them right now. One part of them feels pulled toward you with a quiet but powerful emotional force. It is not loud or dramatic, but it is constant. The other part resists that pull, because accepting it would mean facing emotions they were not ready to deal with before. It would require honesty, vulnerability, and letting go of old emotional defenses that once made them feel safe. They are standing in a space of inner conflict, trying to understand why your presence still stays in their thoughts in such a natural way. They notice how your memory appears in quiet moments without being invited. They also notice how nothing else seems to fully replace what they felt with you, even if they try to move forward in other directions. This is the stage just before clarity arrives. The moment where inner resistance becomes too tiring to maintain in the same way. It is not sudden. It builds slowly over time until the mind can no longer keep everything divided. If they return, it will not be random. It will come from the realization that what they shared with you carried a depth they do not easily find elsewhere. And if they choose not to return, it will not be because you are not enough in any way. It will simply mean they were not ready for the level of emotional truth and inner change that this connection required from them. What is important now is not chasing or forcing any outcome. The situation is unfolding in a way that does not respond well to pressure or control. The best thing is to allow space for clarity to form on its own, without trying to rush what is still becoming clear within them. There is a heavy emotional process happening inside them. It is not temporary confusion that disappears quickly. It is a deeper internal struggle that continues to build in silence. On one side, there is emotional pull, shaped by memory, warmth, familiarity, and a feeling of belonging that they cannot easily explain. On the other side, there is a protective inner voice, shaped by past pain, fear of disappointment, and fear of being hurt again. That protective voice tells them to stay guarded. It tells them to avoid vulnerability and keep emotional distance. It tries to protect them from risk, even if that protection also keeps them from something meaningful. These two inner forces are now active at the same time, and the tension between them is becoming harder for them to ignore. In daily life, they may still appear normal. They may keep themselves busy, distracted, and focused on external things. They may act like nothing is affecting them deeply. But internally, avoidance is no longer working the way it used to. What is pushed down does not disappear. It rises again in quieter and stronger ways, especially when everything around them becomes still. because the real struggle was never outside of them. It has always been within their own emotional world. And now that internal space is asking for resolution. You became a turning point in their life without either of you fully realizing it at first. Something about this connection reached parts of them that they had carefully protected for a long time. It touched the version of them that exists beneath their controlled behavior, beneath their emotional walls, and beneath the identity they built to feel safe. Now they are facing a choice that cannot stay unresolved forever. They can continue living within the version of themselves that avoids emotional risk, or they can step toward a more honest and vulnerable version of who they are becoming. That newer version is unfamiliar to them. It requires emotional courage, openness, and a willingness to feel things they usually try to avoid. This inner process is not easy for them. It creates emotional exhaustion because it pulls them in two directions at once. It is reflected in the inconsistency you may have felt, the moments of closeness followed by distance, the times when they seem open and then suddenly withdraw again. This is not always about manipulation or games. In many cases, it is what happens when someone feels something deeply but is afraid of what fully accepting it would require from them emotionally. Desire and fear begin to exist at the same time, and the person becomes caught in between. As this continues, old illusions inside them begin to break down. They can no longer easily tell themselves that what they felt was small or unimportant. They can no longer reduce your presence to something temporary. Instead, they are being pushed to see the situation more clearly, and at the same time, they are being pushed to see themselves more honestly. Old memories return with stronger emotional weight. Shared moments come back with more intensity than before. Even ordinary details begin to feel meaningful in hindsight. Everything that was once pushed aside begins to return in a more complete form. Every silence now feels more meaningful to them. Every moment of distance feels heavier than it used to. This discomfort is part of the process, because real emotional decisions do not come from avoidance. They come from facing what has been avoided for too long. There comes a point where uncertainty becomes too heavy to carry. That point is approaching for them, slowly but steadily. Not because something external suddenly changed, but because internal division cannot last forever without resolution. For a long time, they tried to minimize their feelings. They told themselves it was not that serious. They believed it would pass with time. They convinced themselves they could stay unaffected if they simply did not act on it. But deep inside, something is no longer agreeing with that story. This awareness is what is bringing everything back to the surface. Emotions like this do not disappear when ignored. They stay active beneath the surface and continue to grow in silence. They return in waves, especially during quiet moments, late at night, or in pauses during the day when distractions are no longer strong enough. They begin to notice how often you appear in their thoughts without intention. They notice how your presence still feels familiar in their inner world. It is like a soft background feeling that never fully disappears. Even when they try to focus elsewhere, part of their awareness still circles back to you. Your absence has played an important role in this process. By stepping back, you created space where they had no choice but to sit with their own thoughts. That silence acted like a mirror, reflecting everything they had not fully faced. It brought forward feelings they had been avoiding, including emotional attachment, regret, and a sense of unfinished meaning. When they finally felt the emotional weight of your absence, they stopped seeing it as something minor. Instead, they began to compare what they lost with everything else around them. And in that comparison, your emotional depth stands out more clearly in their mind. Inside them now, fear and desire are both active at full strength. The desire pulls them toward connection, warmth, and emotional familiarity. The fear pulls them away, trying to protect them from vulnerability and possible emotional pain. For the first time, desire is beginning to feel stronger than fear in certain moments. This creates internal pressure that they cannot easily resolve. It feels like an emotional storm that rises and falls within them, depending on the moment, their thoughts, and their memories. They are not at peace in this state of hesitation, not because they do not care, but because they are going through a deep internal struggle that is forcing them toward a decision point. This is no longer just about a connection between two people. It has become something that also reflects their identity, their emotional growth, and the kind of person they are becoming. At its core, this moment is about transformation. It is about whether they remain who they were before this connection, or whether they allow themselves to become someone more open, more aware, and more emotionally honest. While they may seem more unsettled or distant on the outside right now, do not misunderstand this behavior as the end. What is happening is much deeper than what it looks like on the surface. They are slowly realizing that staying in this draining middle space, where they are neither fully present nor completely gone, has taken away their peace for a long time. It is starting to weigh on them in a way they can no longer ignore. They are being pushed inward, toward their own truth, and forced to take responsibility for what they feel instead of avoiding it. They are beginning to understand that continuing to stay in old patterns comes at a cost. It is like trading the comfort of what they know for a connection that requires real emotional growth. The safety of their old life once felt enough, but now it feels limiting. Something inside them is changing, and that change is not gentle anymore. It is active, steady, and unavoidable. Comment pull if you can feel them being drawn back toward you, even in the silence, even when nothing is being said out loud. What once felt like protection to them now feels more like a prison. The hesitation they relied on to stay safe is no longer protecting them in the same way. Instead, it is trapping them inside their own emotions. The emotional walls they built are starting to crack under the weight of everything they have been avoiding. They are remembering moments where they stayed silent, even when they wanted to speak. They are seeing clearly how pride replaced honesty and how avoidance replaced truth. The distance between what they feel and what they actually do is shrinking. This creates pressure, but also clarity. It is making real change not just possible, but necessary. When a person is left alone with their thoughts for long enough, truth begins to rise on its own. It does not need outside pressure. It comes from within. That is exactly what is happening in their inner world right now. This shift is not being caused by other people or outside influence. It is coming from something internal that is growing stronger each day. They can no longer rely on uncertainty the way they used to. Everything they avoided is now slowly becoming impossible to ignore. If this message reflects what they are going through, then there is a deeper awareness forming inside them that cannot be stopped by distraction anymore. The connection is becoming more present in their quiet moments. It shows up when everything around them slows down. It appears when they try to focus on other things in life, and each time it returns, it shapes their understanding more clearly. What once felt random is now starting to feel like a pattern. What once felt confusing is now starting to feel meaningful, even if they do not fully understand it yet. They are beginning to realize something important. They were not only missing a person, they were missing the version of themselves that existed when they were connected to you. A version that felt more open, more honest, and more emotionally alive. And now, being away from that version of themselves is starting to feel painful in a way they cannot ignore anymore. This becomes a turning point in their inner journey, so it becomes clearer now. When someone starts missing who they were when they were with you, the question is no longer whether the connection mattered. The question becomes whether they are ready to face the truth that the connection revealed within them. As this awareness grows, the outside world loses some of its power over them. They can still stay busy. They can still distract themselves with work, people, or routines. But underneath all of that, there is still a quiet pull leading back to the same place, back to you, and back to what was never fully resolved. This is the stage where the protective ego starts to weaken. The ego always chooses distance because it feels safer. It tries to stay in control and avoid emotional risk. But now, a deeper part of them is beginning to understand something different. Staying disconnected carries its own kind of pain. And that emptiness can start to feel heavier than the fear of closeness itself. Because of that, they are now standing between two futures. One is familiar, safe, and emotionally empty. The other is uncertain, but it carries the possibility of something real and meaningful. For the first time, the unknown does not feel completely unworthy. It starts to feel like it might be worth more than the safety they have been holding on to. This is where courage begins to form. Not because fear disappears, but because truth starts to matter more than fear. As this shift happens, a quiet stillness begins to settle inside them. The emotional pressure is still there, but it feels different now. It is more grounded, more honest, less chaotic than before. They are no longer pushing every feeling away. They are starting to let themselves feel things fully, without immediately shutting them down. And in doing so, they are beginning to accept that what they feel is real. That acceptance brings a quiet sense of peace. Not because everything is solved, but because inner conflict is slowly turning into clarity. They are standing at the edge of an old version of themselves, looking towards something new that they do not fully understand yet. The only thing separating these two versions of life is a choice they cannot avoid forever. This becomes a moment of self-reflection and honesty. The silence around them is no longer just silence. It is reflecting them back to themselves. It shows them where pride stopped love from growing. It shows them where fear replaced truth. It shows them where avoidance created distance that never needed to exist. They are remembering conversations, moments, expressions, and pauses from the past. But now they are seeing them with more maturity, more awareness, and more emotional depth than before. This is not just about regret. It is about understanding what actually matters now. The things they once valued more than connection, like control, image, or emotional protection, are starting to feel less important. They are not giving comfort anymore. Instead, they feel empty compared to something real and emotionally meaningful. Something else is also changing inside them. Empathy is growing. They are starting to feel what distance might have felt like from your side. They are beginning to understand the emotional weight that may have been carried silently. That understanding softens a person from within. It makes emotional avoidance harder to maintain. Once responsibility enters the mind fully, everything starts to shift. They are no longer reacting only from fear. They are becoming more aware of their own role in what has happened. And that awareness makes everything more serious in a quiet way. Not dramatic, not loud, but deeply serious in an internal sense. Because now they understand that whatever they choose next will reveal something real about who they are becoming. The final layers of hesitation are starting to disappear. The words should and could are losing power. In their place, something stronger is forming. A sense of urgency that cannot be ignored. Comment heavy if you can feel that this connection has started to feel heavier lately, like something inside them is pressing for action. There is a growing feeling that they must acknowledge what is real. They must face what they feel. They must stop staying stuck in emotional paralysis that keeps repeating itself. Time is also beginning to feel different for them. It no longer feels endless. It feels limited and more valuable than before. They are realizing that staying stuck is also a decision, and often the most painful one over time. This realization is not just mental, it is physical too. It shows up in their body, in their chest, in the pressure they feel when they think about speaking honestly or reaching out. The unknown still scares them, but the familiar emptiness of staying disconnected is starting to feel even more frightening. That is why movement is getting closer. Thoughts that were once suppressed are rising naturally. Actions that once felt impossible are becoming harder to avoid. Because when truth becomes strong enough, silence stops feeling safe. It starts to feel uncomfortable, even unbearable. Remember this clearly. Whatever happens next will not come from a sudden impulse. It will come from a long internal process of finally facing themselves without hiding. That is why this moment carries so much weight. It is not temporary. It is not something that fades quickly. It is a deep inner shift that changes how a person sees everything. Slowly at first, quietly at first, and then all at once, when the breaking point arrives. At the center of all of this, one truth remains steady. You change something inside them that does not go away. You showed them a version of themselves they could not ignore. You reflected something back to them that they had lost touch with. In that sense, you became a mirror, a catalyst, and a reminder of what they are capable of emotionally. Even in silence, your impact did not disappear. It stayed with them. It followed them into their quietest thoughts. And now that noise is fading, that impact becomes even clearer. The question is no longer whether this mattered. The question is when they will act on what they already know inside. Layer by layer, confusion is falling away. What remains is something more grounded and harder to deny. They are realizing that trying to control their feelings only made them stronger. Avoiding truth only made it louder. And pretending not to know is no longer an option they can maintain. If you have been feeling this shift too, trust that feeling. Something real is reaching its final stage within them. They are being pushed toward a choice between fear and truth, between comfort and honesty, between staying stuck and finally moving forward. Your role in this moment is not to chase. It is to stay steady, stay grounded. Let things unfold without forcing them. Let them feel your absence clearly, so they can also understand the value of your presence. Let them face the full weight of what they feel without interference. The person who once hesitated is now approaching a point where going back and forth is no longer possible. Like this message, comment which part hit you the most deeply, and stay open to what unfolds next, because this inner conflict is slowly turning into clarity. Soon, one truth will rise above all the confusion that came before it. And when that moment arrives, it will show clearly what has been real all along. When life finally demands honesty and courage, the silence before it will be understood as the final stage before truth becomes unavoidable. If this message connected with what you have been sensing, hold on to that feeling. Trust the timing of what is unfolding, because the next chapter is already moving closer than it seems.